The crystal glasses were waiting, the ones we only used for special occasions, sitting on the starched white tablecloth I'd spent an hour ironing. 20 years, 2 decades, it felt like a lifetime and no time at all. I could still remember the feeling of his hand in mine at the cheap little chapel we'd gotten married in, the nervous energy that buzzed between us, the certainty that we were an unbreakable team. I de-arranged the photos on the mantelpiece, a chronological journey of our life together. Us as lanky, broke college kids, us holding our first child, a bundle of terrifying, beautiful responsibility, us standing in front of the house we'd sunk every penny into, the place where our children's heights were still marked in faint pencil on a doorframe. I had recreated the menu from our first date, a slightly burned chicken parmesan that we had laughed about for years. I thought he would see it and smile, that he would remember the girl with more love than cooking skills and see that she was still here, still his. The whole day had been steeped in this sweet, hopeful nostalgia. I was trying to remind us of the foundation we had built, a foundation that felt a little shaky lately, a little neglected under the weight of mortgages and teenage children and the quiet routine of a long marriage. He'd been distant, working late, glued to his phone with a half-smile that wasn't for me. I'd told myself it was stress. I told myself all marriages hit these lulls that you just had to hold on tight and steer through them. So I planned this anniversary dinner as an anchor, a lighthouse to guide us back to shore. When I heard his car in the driveway, my heart did a little flutter, a pathetic, hopeful little beat. He walked in, not with flowers, not with a smile, but with the cold, sterile expression of a surgeon about to deliver bad news. He didn't even look at the table, at the photos, at the effort I had poured into every detail. His eyes met mine, and they were the eyes of a stranger. There was no warmth, no shared history, just a flat, dismissive appraisal. He told me to sit down. He didn't sit with me at the beautifully set table. He stood by the door as if ready to make a quick escape. And then he detonated our life. He said he was leaving. He said it with the same casual tone he used to say he was going to the gym. He told me he'd met someone. She was young, vibrant, exciting. She made him feel alive, he said. And then he looked at me, at the woman who had borne his children, managed his home, supported his career, nursed him through illnesses, and celebrated his every minor victory, and he delivered the final, soul-crushing blow. He told me I was old, that I had let myself go, that I was boring and predictable. He said my life revolved around nothing, that I had no ambition, no passion. And then he pointed a dismissive hand towards the small room off the kitchen, my sanctuary, the one place in the house that was entirely mine. He called it my room of dusty junk. He said my little hobby, the thing I poured my quiet hours into, was pathetic, a worthless waste of time for a worthless woman. Each word was a perfectly aimed stone, shattering the fragile stained glass window of my self-worth. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there frozen, the smell of slightly burned chicken parmesan filling a silence that was louder than any argument we'd ever had. My hobby, my worthless, pathetic hobby, he had no idea. He saw it as a silly little pastime, a way for his boring wife to occupy her empty hours. He'd never once shown any genuine interest. He'd glance in, see the clutter of my work, and make a sarcastic comment about how much precious junk I was accumulating. He never saw the passion. He never saw the meticulous detail, the hours of research, the sheer, unadulterated joy it brought me. My world was the world of the forgotten and the discarded. I found old, broken things, tarnished silver lockets, clocks with frozen hands, dolls with missing limbs and faded faces, and I gave them new life. But my real passion, the thing he truly despised, was what I did with them. I created miniature worlds, intricate dioramas housed in antique music boxes and glass domes. Each one told a story, a tiny, perfect library tucked inside a grandfather clock, a whimsical, glowing forest hidden within a broken violin, a miniature, rain-swept Parisian street scene constructed in a vintage suitcase. It was meticulous, painstaking work. It required the patience of a saint and the steady hand of a surgeon. For me, it was more than a hobby. It was a form of meditation, a way to build small, perfect worlds when my own felt chaotic and out of control. It was my secret language, the one place where I was the architect, the creator, the god of my own tiny universe. What my husband didn't know, what he couldn't possibly comprehend, was that I wasn't just creating these worlds for myself. A few years ago, on a whim, I started a blog. I took high-resolution photos of my creations, writing short, evocative stories to accompany them. I thought a few people might see it, fellow eccentrics who shared my love for the miniature and the magical. But it grew, slowly at first, then all at once. My blog developed a quiet, devoted following. People from all over the world would leave comments, marveling at the detail, sharing how my tiny worlds provided them with a moment of escape. Then the emails started. People wanted to buy them. At first I was hesitant. They felt too personal to sell, but the requests were persistent and the prices they offered were staggering. I sold my first piece for $5,000 to a collector in Japan. I was shocked, elated, and I hid the money in a separate account he knew nothing about. It felt like a betrayal, but I told myself it was my what-if fund. What if the car breaks down? What if one of the kids has an emergency? It was my secret safety net in a life where I had no financial independence. As my online presence grew, so did the demand. I was getting commissions from architects who admired my structural precision, from authors who wanted a physical representation of the worlds they had created, from wealthy, anonymous patrons who simply wanted to own a piece of my magic. The dusty junk room had become a six-figure-a-year business, operating silently under his nose. He was so consumed by his own world, his own importance, that he never noticed the frequent courier pickups, the expensive art supplies that arrived in plain brown boxes, my late nights hunched over my workbench long after he had gone to sleep. He just saw his boring, worthless wife tinkering with her trash. The final evolution of my secret career had happened about 6 months before our anniversary. I was contacted by a creative director from a major film studio, the kind that produced epic fantasy blockbusters. He had stumbled upon my blog and was captivated. He said I didn't just build miniatures, I built worlds. He wanted to know if I had ever considered working in concept art and production design. He flew to meet me, a secret meeting in a coffee shop in a neighboring town while my husband thought I was at the grocery store. We talked for hours. I showed him my detailed sketchbooks, the blueprints for worlds I hadn't even built yet. He was blown away. He offered me a contract, a chance to be a lead designer on their new, highly anticipated fantasy franchise. The numbers he talked about were life-altering, the kind of money that existed in a different reality from mine, but more than the money, it was the validation. The thing he called worthless, the most powerful man in entertainment was calling genius. The contract was sitting in my email inbox, a ticking time bomb of opportunity. I had been waiting for the right moment to tell him, naively thinking he would be proud, that it would be something we could celebrate together. I imagined his shock, his awe. I thought it might even fix the growing distance between us, that he would finally see me, truly see me. I never imagined he would preempt my triumphant revelation with his own devastating one. As he stood there by the door, laying out the cold, practical logistics of our separation, how they would sell the house, how he would be fair with the settlement because he was a good man, I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The hurt was still there, a deep, ragged wound, but beneath it, a new feeling was taking root. It was a feeling of pure, unadulterated power. He was dissecting our shared life, tallying up our assets, completely oblivious to the fact that the single greatest asset in our home was me. He was leaving me for a younger, shinier model, convinced he was upgrading. He was walking away from a multi-million-dollar lottery ticket because he was too arrogant to read the numbers. He finished his speech, his final, dismissive words hanging in the air. "I'll pack a bag for tonight. My lawyer will be in touch." He turned and walked out of the life we had built, out of the home I had made, without a single look back. I sat there for a long time at the table set for a celebration that had become a funeral. The candles I had lit flickered, casting long shadows on the wall. I looked at the photos on the mantelpiece, the ghosts of the man I had loved and the woman I had been. Then I stood up, walked into my room of dusty junk, and opened my laptop. The contract was still there, waiting. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling slightly, and I clicked accept. The flame on one of the candles a few feet away sputtered and died, plunging one side of the room into darkness. It felt symbolic. One life was over, but another, a life he couldn't even begin to imagine, was just beginning. And I was going to build it, piece by meticulous piece, into an empire he would one day marvel at from the ruins of the world he had just destroyed. The silence he left behind was a living entity. It breathed in the empty spaces, sat in his chair at the dinner table, and slept on his side of the bed. In the first few weeks, the grief was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest and making it hard to breathe. Every corner of the house held a memory, a ghost of a shared laugh or a quiet moment. I would find one of his stray socks under the sofa and crumble. The pain of his betrayal was sharp and constant, but his words were what echoed the loudest in the oppressive quiet. Old, boring, worthless. They became a mantra of my self-doubt, a cruel soundtrack to my lonely days. He, on the other hand, was busy embracing his new life with a shameless public glee. His social media, which had once been a boring stream of golf photos and articles about finance, was now a vibrant, cringeworthy testament to his midlife crisis. There he was, grinning like a teenager on a beach in Mexico with his new girlfriend, a girl barely older than our eldest child. There they were, clinking champagne glasses in a ridiculously expensive restaurant. He captioned the photos with hashtags like New Beginnings and Living Myb's Life. It was a performance, a curated narrative of happiness designed to both impress his followers and, I suspected, to wound me. And it worked. Every photo was a fresh stab, a public declaration of my obsolescence. He was so busy crafting this new image, so convinced of his upgrade, that he was utterly oblivious to the seismic shift happening in my own life. While he was posting selfies from a jet ski, I was on transatlantic conference calls with some of the most creative minds in the film industry. While he was picking out new, fashionably tight shirts, I was signing incorporation papers and hiring a patent attorney. My worthless hobby had a new name, Ethelgard Studios. I chose the name deliberately. It was Old English, meaning noble protector, and it felt right. I was protecting my own future now, my own creations. The film studio didn't just want me, they wanted to build a world with me. The contract was more than just a design gig, it was a partnership. They were investing in my vision, giving me a state-of-the-art workshop, a team of artisans to manage, and a percentage of the merchandising rights for a film franchise they were banking on being the next global phenomenon. The advance alone was more money than he and I had made in the last 10 years combined. Seeing that number in my new private business account was an out-of-body experience. It was an absurdity, a string of zeros that didn't seem real. I stared at the screen for a full hour, half expecting it to be a mistake. But it was real, it was security, it was freedom. It was the sound of a new door opening as the old one was slammed in my face. I hired a sharp, ruthless divorce lawyer, a woman who specialized in dealing with arrogant, high-income husbands. When I explained my situation, she had a predatory glint in her eye. The first thing she did was file an injunction to freeze our joint assets, which sent him into a rage. He called me screaming about how I was trying to ruin him, how dare I after everything he'd done for me. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I let him yell, and when he was finished, I calmly told him to have his lawyer speak to my lawyer from now on, and then I hung up. It was the first time I had ever hung up on him. It felt like a small but significant victory. The next step was moving. The house was suffocating me with its memories, and I knew he would force a sale anyway, eager to get his hands on the equity to fund his new life. I found a sprawling industrial loft downtown, a space with high ceilings, huge windows, and enough room for both a living area and a massive workshop. I hired movers to pack up 20 years of my life. I was ruthless. I kept the things that belonged to me and the children, the things that held genuine sentimental value. Everything else, his clothes, his golf trophies, his leather armchair, I had them put in storage to be dealt with by the lawyers. As I stood in the empty house for the last time, the pencil marks on the doorframe a faint reminder of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a profound sense of release. I was shedding a skin, leaving behind the ghost of the woman who had lived there. Ethelgard Studios came to life in my new loft. The space, which had once been a textile factory, was soon filled with the hum of 3D printers, the scent of curring resin and sawdust, and the focused energy of the small, brilliant team I had assembled. I hired a master woodworker, a digital sculptor, and a young engineering prodigy who could make anything light up, move, or smoke. They were my people. They understood my obsession with detail, my relentless pursuit of perfection. They didn't see a boring, middle-aged woman, they saw a visionary. They called me by my first name, but with a deference and respect my own husband had never shown me. We worked relentlessly, fueled by coffee and a shared passion for creation. We were building the aesthetic of a universe. Intricate models of fantastical cities, prototypes for otherworldly creatures, meticulously crafted props that felt ancient and real. My hands, which he had once criticized for not being manicured enough, were now creating magic. My mind, which he had deemed uninteresting, was now architecting a world that would soon captivate millions. I was too busy, too engaged, too exhilarated to spend much time thinking about him, but I would hear things. Our mutual friends, the ones who had sided with me, would pass on little snippets of information. His trip to Mexico had been put on a credit card that was now maxed out. His new girlfriend liked the lifestyle he had promised her, but she wasn't as keen on the budget he was now trying to enforce. He was complaining about the legal fees, about how vindictive I was being. He had told people I was probably living in some sad little apartment, struggling to make ends meet, and that he felt sorry for me. The narrative he was spinning was one of his magnanimity and my pathetic dependence. He had no idea I was sitting in a multi-million-dollar studio, making decisions that would affect the stock price of a major Hollywood studio. The disconnect was staggering. It felt like I was living in a secret, parallel reality. One of the strangest moments came when my son came to visit the loft for the first time. He walked in, his eyes wide with awe as he looked at the massive work tables covered in models and blueprints. He saw the concept art pinned to the walls, the half-finished dragon skull we were working on, the sheer scale of the operation. He looked at me, standing there in my paint-splattered jeans and focused expression, and said, "Mom, this is so cool, I had no idea." It was a simple statement, but it meant the world to me. My own children were finally seeing me for who I was, not just as a mother, but as a creator, an artist, a boss. The secrecy couldn't last forever. The studio had a release date to meet, and the film's marketing machine was slowly beginning to rumble to life. A major magazine known for its stunning photography and in-depth profiles on creative geniuses wanted to do a feature on the mysterious, reclusive artist behind the look of the most anticipated film of the decade. My new publicist, a woman who was as sharp as a tack, insisted it was time. "We need to control the narrative," she said. "It's time for the world to meet the woman who builds worlds." I was terrified, but I knew she was right. The photo shoot took place in my loft, my workshop. They captured me not in a ball gown but in my element, surrounded by the beautiful, intricate junk my husband had so despised. The journalist was fascinated by my story, this quiet, unassuming woman who had harbored a world-class talent in secret. I was careful. I didn't mention my husband by name. I didn't talk about the divorce. I simply framed my story as one of a lifelong passion that had finally found its moment. I spoke about the beauty of forgotten things and the magic of giving them a new purpose. The article was set to be published on the exact date of our 21st anniversary, the day our divorce was scheduled to be finalized. It wasn't an act of revenge, not really. It was simply an act of timing, of cosmic poetry. As the final legal negotiations began, his lawyer was aggressive, demanding half of everything, including the house, the savings, and a significant portion of my future earnings, which they condescendingly estimated based on me getting some sort of part-time administrative job. My lawyer simply smiled and said we would be happy to provide a full financial disclosure at the final meeting. He had no idea. He was fighting for a share of a puddle, completely oblivious to the ocean of wealth that was about to come crashing down on him. The stage was set. The magazine was at the printer. The lawyers were scheduled to meet. He was still posting pictures of his fancy dinners, living his best life, a clueless jester in a kingdom he didn't know I was about to rule. The calm before the storm was almost deafening. The day of the final divorce settlement meeting felt charged, electric. I woke up not with a sense of dread, but with a calm, steely resolve. I chose my outfit carefully, not a power suit, but a simple, elegant cashmere dress in a deep charcoal gray. It was understated, confident, the kind of quiet luxury he would never recognize. I wore a single piece of jewelry, a beautiful, intricate silver locket I had made myself, a miniature world sealed within it. It was a private reminder of where I had come from. My lawyer and I met in her gleaming corner office overlooking the city. The documents were laid out on the mahogany table in neat, formidable stacks: my financial disclosure, the contracts with the film studio, the incorporation papers for Ethelgard Studios, the audited statements of my business account. It was the story of the last year of my life, told in numbers and legal jargon. It was my truth. He arrived with his lawyer, looking smug and impatient. He had a fresh tan and was wearing a shirt that was just a little too tight, a desperate attempt to cling to the youth he was chasing. He gave me a cursory nod, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, as if my very presence was an inconvenience. He didn't look at me, not really. He still saw the woman he had left, the drab, predictable wife. He couldn't see the person I had become. The meeting began. His lawyer launched into a familiar speech, painting a picture of my husband as a generous, successful man who had supported his dependent wife for 20 years. He spoke of my lack of career, my financial reliance, and their generous offer to give me half of the marital assets and a paltry temporary alimony. He used the phrase "no discernible job skills" at one point. I didn't flinch. I just looked at my lawyer, who gave me a subtle, reassuring nod. Then it was our turn. My lawyer, a true artist in the courtroom, began. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "We acknowledge your client's contributions to the marriage, and now, as required, we would like to present my client's current financial disclosure for consideration." She slid the first folder across the table. It was the Ethelgard Studios incorporation document. His lawyer glanced at it, a flicker of confusion on his face. My ex-husband didn't even bother to look. He was scrolling through something on his phone, bored. My lawyer continued, her voice even and steady. She slid another folder across. "This is the primary contract my client holds for her design work." I watched his face as his lawyer opened the folder. I saw his eyes widen. I saw him lean forward, reading the page again as if he couldn't believe what it said. He looked up at my lawyer, then at me, his mouth slightly agape. My ex-husband finally looked up from his phone, annoyed by the delay. "What is it?" he snapped at his lawyer. His lawyer didn't answer. He just slid the contract in front of him. I will never, for as long as I live, forget the look on my husband's face in that moment. It was a slow-motion cascade of emotions. First, confusion as he scanned the document, then dawning comprehension as he saw the name of the film studio, the astronomical figures, then utter, complete disbelief. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock, searching my face for some sign that this was a joke, a prank, a typo, but he found none. All he found was the calm, steady gaze of a woman he didn't know at all. What is this?" he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Ethelgard Studios, that's you?" Before I could answer, my lawyer slid the final document across the table, the certified statement from my business bank account. The number at the bottom, the current balance, was obscene. It was a figure that represented more money than he could have hoped to earn in 10 lifetimes. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of green. The smug confidence, the arrogant swagger, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out man shrinking in his chair. He looked at me, and for the first time, he truly saw me. He saw the late nights I had spent in my workshop not as a waste of time, but as the construction of an empire. He saw the courier pickups not as deliveries of more junk, but as the logistics of a thriving international business. He saw 20 years of being underestimated, of being dismissed, and he finally understood the colossal, life-altering mistake he had made. The rest of the meeting was a blur for him. His lawyer, now flustered and sweating, tried to argue that this was a marital asset that he was entitled to half. My lawyer calmly produced the timeline, proving that the business was conceptualized and the contracts signed after our official date of separation. She pointed out that his own sworn testimony, where he belittled my worthless hobby, would make any claim of his involvement laughable in court. He was entitled to half of our shared savings and the equity in the house, nothing more. He walked out of that office a broken man. The life he had been so proud of, the one he was funding with credit cards and swagger, suddenly looked pathetic. The young girlfriend and the fancy dinners were a cheap consolation prize for losing the lottery. That same day, the magazine article went live. My story was everywhere. The overnight success of the mysterious artist behind the year's biggest film. My face was on the cover, serene and confident, surrounded by the magical worlds I had built. My phone exploded with messages from people from my past, people who were stunned, people who suddenly wanted to be my friend. But his silence was the most telling response of all. The social media posts stopped. The curated performance of his perfect new life came to an abrupt end. The divorce was finalized. I wrote him a check for his half of our old life, and I never saw him again. I heard, through the grapevine, that his girlfriend left him a few weeks later. The money, it turned out, was a crucial part of his charm. He had to sell the house quickly at a loss. He moved into a small, sad apartment. A few months ago, I was driving through my old neighborhood and I saw him on the street getting out of a beat-up car. He looked diminished. The expensive clothes hung loosely on his frame. The confident stride was gone, replaced by a weary shuffle. He looked old, he looked tired, he looked worthless, and I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction. He was just a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer mine. My life is full now, not with bitterness but with creation. My loft is a hive of activity, a place where magic is engineered and dreams are built. I am surrounded by people who respect me, who are inspired by my vision. I am the architect of my own world, both literally and figuratively. His betrayal was the catalyst, the terrible, painful event that forced me to step out of the shadows and claim my own power. He thought he was throwing me away, but he was just setting me free. He tried to write my ending, to cast me as the sad, forgotten wife. He had no idea I was the one holding the pen and I was just getting to the best part of my story. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Share this story with your friends and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Revenge Laura for more episodes.